The twin sons of Celia Prime were high in the sky. A human named Ray stood in the center of a large alien festival. Strange music filled the air, and colorful lights floated around him. He had only arrived that morning, part of a peace team. From Earth, Ray had never seen creatures like the Scions before. Tall, glowing, and elegant, they looked like beings from a dream. They moved with grace and spoke in soft, musical voices. Ray smiled politely, holding a small translator device in one hand. Everyone around him was dancing, laughing, and sharing food. The Scions welcomed humans warmly. And this festival was part of the peace celebration. Still, Ray felt out of place. He didn't know the rules, the customs, or even how to say hello properly. Then he saw her, a young Celion girl with long silver hair and glowing purple eyes. She was laughing with her friends near a fruit stand. She looked his way, and their eyes met. For a moment, time slowed down. Ray felt a strange pull in his chest, but he didn't understand it. The girl walked over, bold and curious. She looked up at him and smiled. "You human," she said in broken English. "You knew?" Ray nodded. "Yeah, it's my first time." "Here." She tilted her head, studying him. "You soft," she said. Poking his arm like bread, Ray laughed nervously. "Thanks." "I think," her friends giggled, whispering something in their language. Then, suddenly, the girl leaned forward and bit his hand. Not hard, just a light, playful bite on the skin. Ray yelped in surprise, pulling his hand back. "Hey, what was that?" he said, confused. The girl smiled brightly. "Joke, human." "Joke." Ray laughed awkwardly, rubbing his hand. "Okay, weird joke, but all right." But something was wrong. Everything around them had gone silent. The music stopped, the lights dimmed. Celion eyes turned toward them, wide with shock. Guards lowered their weapons and bowed their heads. The elders, sitting on high thrones, stood up with serious faces. Ray looked around, confused. "What's going on?" he whispered. The girl's smile vanished, her face turning pale. She stepped back, shaking her head. No, I didn't mean it. Not real. Not real." One of the elders spoke, his voice deep and echoing. "The bond has been made." Ray blinked. "What bond?" The elder looked at him calmly. "She bit you. She chose you. You are now her mate." Ray laughed, thinking it was a joke. Wait, no, that can't be right. She was just joking. But no one laughed. The girl looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I didn't know it would work with humans," she whispered. "I didn't mean to choose." Not like this. Ray's heart started beating faster. "Okay, let's slow down. Can we undo it?" Another elder shook his head. "The sacred bond cannot be undone. You are bound," he said, "by the old law." Ray backed away, but the guards moved closer. One placed a glowing bracelet on his wrist. The girl covered her face with her hands. "I ruined everything," she said, her voice breaking. Ray tried to speak, but the elder raised his hand. "You must prepare," he said. "The joining must begin." "The what?" Ray shouted, but no one answered. He was led away through a glowing hallway. Crystal lights lit the path, and the walls pulsed with energy. The girl followed behind him, silent and scared. He turned to her. "What does this mean? What is joining?" She whispered. "It means we are one now." Ray shook his head. "No, I didn't agree to this." They entered a room covered in strange markings. Symbols glowed on the floor as Ray stepped inside. The door behind them melted closed. Ray ran back, trying to open it, but it was solid crystal now. "Let me out," he shouted. The girl stood in the corner, holding her arms. "If you leave now," she said in a soft, shaking voice, "I will be punished, maybe even killed." Ray turned to her, shocked. "I didn't want this," he said. She nodded slowly. "Me too, but it's done now," she whispered. And only you can choose what happens next. Ray sat on the floor of the glowing crystal room. His heart was racing, his hands shaking. The door had sealed behind him, and there was no way out. He turned to the alien girl, Lyrian, standing quietly in the corner. Her glowing eyes were full of fear and guilt. "I don't understand," Ray said softly. "Why me?" Lyrian didn't answer at first. Then she walked closer, her steps slow, her shoulders heavy. "I was only joking," she whispered. "It was just a game." Ray stared at her. "Then why is everyone acting like I married you?" Lyrian looked away, her voice trembling. "Because here, the bite is not a joke. It means bond," she said. "It means mate for life." Ray's eyes widened. "But I didn't agree to anything." Lyrian nodded. "I know." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I didn't think it would work on a human. I didn't know the bond would react. But now, the whole tribe knows." Just then, the door to the chamber slid open again. 2 tall Celion warriors entered, wearing ceremonial robes. Between them was an old woman, her skin like shining silver glass. She was the High Matron, one of the oldest elders. She looked at Ray with calm but serious eyes. "You are now part of our sacred law," she said. "The girl chose, and you were marked. You cannot walk away easily." Ray stood up. "I didn't choose anything," he said firmly. "The matron nodded slowly. "That may be true, but your choice now decides her fate. If you accept the bond, she is honored. If you reject it, she will be punished." Ray looked at Lyrian, who lowered her head in shame. "She didn't mean to," he said quickly. "She was just playing." The matron spoke again. "Intent does not matter. The bond has been formed." Ray stepped back, feeling pressure building in his chest. "This isn't fair," he whispered. "Maybe not." The matron replied, "But it is our way." Suddenly, another voice shouted from behind the matron. A younger male Celion stormed into the room. He was tall and angry, his golden tattoos glowing bright, unacceptable. He cried, "A human cannot be her mate. I was promised her by her family." Ray looked at him, confused. "Who are you?" he asked. The Celion male glared. "I am Kale, her true suitor. I trained for years, prepared for the bond, and now this soft, weak human takes her." Lyrian stepped in front of Ray, her voice shaking. "Kale, stop," she said. "It was a mistake." Kale pointed at Ray. "Then break the bond." The matron raised her hand, silencing him. "The bond cannot be broken," she said calmly. "Not without sacrifice." Ray narrowed his eyes. What kind of sacrifice? The room fell silent. Then the matron said, "To reject the bond, Lyrian must give up her clan name and status. She will become nameless. She will live alone, shamed, outside the city." Lyrian's eyes widened in horror. Kale smirked. "Then let it happen." Ray turned to Lyrian, stunned. "That's too much, just for one mistake." She didn't speak, just stared at the floor. Ray took a breath, thinking hard. "I don't even know her," he said quietly. "We just met." The matron nodded. "That is true, but bonds are not always born from love. Sometimes they grow into it." Ray turned to Lyrian again. He could see how afraid she was, how alone she looked. "I need time," he said. "You have 3 days," the matron said. "Until then, you both stay in the temple. Later." Inside a small shared room in the temple, Ray sat on a soft glowing mat. Lyrian sat across from him, her knees pulled to her chest. "I ruined everything," she whispered. Ray shook his head. "No. I think your people made it complicated." She looked at him. "You're not angry?" He shrugged. "I'm confused, but not angry. I just don't want you to be hurt." Lyrian looked at him with surprise. "No one has said that to me before." They sat in silence for a while. Then Lyrian spoke again. "I never had many friends," she said. My parents left when I was small. My clan raised me. But I was always the one who caused trouble. Ray listened quietly. You're not bad, he said finally, just unlucky. She smiled a little. The first smile since the incident. That night, as they lay on opposite sides of the room, Ray looked up at the ceiling, glowing softly with stars. He whispered to himself, "This is the weirdest day of my life." And somewhere across the room, Lyrian whispered back, "But maybe not the worst." 3 days passed slowly inside the temple. Ray and Lyrian stayed in the quiet chambers, watched by silent guards. Outside, the Celion world moved on, full of glowing towers and floating gardens. But inside, everything felt still, like time had paused just for them. Ray had asked many times if the bond could be broken without hurting Lyrian. Each answer was the same: no, not without shame. She would lose her name, her place, her future. Ray couldn't stop thinking about that. He had come to make peace, not to destroy someone's life. On the final day, a soft bell rang in the temple. Lyrian sat on the floor, her head bowed, her hands shaking. "They will call us soon," she said quietly. Ray looked at her. "Tell me one more time, is this really forever?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, if the bond is accepted. It cannot be undone, even by death. The bond mark remains." Ray touched the place on his wrist where the glowing bite mark still pulsed faintly. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "I know," Lyrian replied, her voice soft. "I didn't either." Ray looked into her eyes. "But I also didn't ask to see someone cry like that for my sake. And I didn't ask to care about you this much after only 3 days, Lyrian." Blinked in surprise, Ray stood up, walking to the crystal wall. "Let's go," he said. "Let's see what this bond really means." Moments later, they were led to the Hall of Connection. The room was wide and round, with floating lights spinning above like stars. In the center was a raised platform made of white stone. The elders stood around it, silent and waiting. Kale was there too, standing to the side with fire in his eyes. He clenched his fists, but did not speak. Ray stepped forward with Lyrian beside him. The matron raised her hand and spoke. "Human Ray, you stand at the crossroads. One step forward, and the bond becomes eternal. One step back, and the bond is broken. But the girl is lost to exile." The hall was silent. Ray looked at Lyrian, then at the glowing path. Before him, he took a breath, then a step forward. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The elders raised their hands, and a soft light formed above them. The mark on Ray's wrist began to glow brighter. And then, something strange happened. A mark appeared on Lyrian's shoulder in the exact same shape. She looked at it, stunned. Ray stepped closer to her. "What's happening?" The matron smiled gently. "The bond has answered you. Only those whose hearts connect both ways receive matching marks. It means she accepted you too." Ray looked at Lyrian, shocked. "You knew." She blushed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to say it, but I felt it when I bit you. Something pulled inside me. It was like my soul woke up." Ray laughed softly, not out of humor, but wonder. "I've never believed in fate," he said, "but this feels close." Then came the final part of the ritual. They had to place their hands together and speak the Celian words of unity. Ray repeated the sounds slowly, his accent awkward but clear. Lyrian spoke hers with trembling lips. A ring of light formed around them, lifting them slightly off the ground. And in that moment, Ray felt it, her emotions, her memories, her thoughts. He gasped as he saw flashes of her past. A lonely girl standing outside her clan's hall, mocked for being strange and too playful, crying under glowing trees where no one could see, wishing just once someone would choose her first. Ray's chest tightened. He never expected to feel her pain like it was his own. When the ritual ended and the light faded, Ray held onto her hand longer than he meant to. He didn't want to let go. The matron stepped forward. "It is done," she said. "The sacred bond has accepted you both." Kale turned away, his face twisted in anger, but he did not challenge it. The elders had spoken. The people began to chant softly, not with celebration, but respect. Later that night, back in their chamber, Lyrian sat beside Ray in silence. Finally, she spoke. "You could have walked away. You could have left me to my shame." Ray looked at her gently. "Maybe I should have," he said with a smile. "But I didn't want to, because somehow you bit me, and now you're inside my heart." Lyrian smiled, her eyes glowing softly. She whispered, "Then maybe that bite wasn't a mistake after all." And for the first time since it all began, they both laughed together. Asterisk, the stars above Celia Prime turned gold that night, a rare event seen only once every generation. The elders said it was a sign from the ancestors, a blessing for a bond that was not expected but fully accepted. Ray stood beside Lyrian outside the temple gates. He wore ceremonial robes made of soft crystal threads. Lyrian stood beside him, her hair tied with silver leaves. She looked calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "Why do I feel like I'm about to walk through a trap?" Ray asked, trying to smile. Lyrian didn't laugh. "Because you are," she whispered. "This is the trial of fire. It is the last step before we are fully joined." Ray blinked. "Trial? What kind of trial?" She looked into his eyes. "It's not a battle of strength," she said. "It's a test of heart. It will show if your soul is truly strong enough to protect the bond." 2 guards opened the temple's giant stone doors. Beyond them was a glowing path made of burning red light. It curved into a forest of flame trees, each one alive with fire-colored leaves. Ray took a deep breath, then stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the path, warmth shot up through his legs. It wasn't painful, but it was real. He could feel the bond mark on his wrist pulse. Lyrian followed close behind, and the door sealed shut behind them. "This is where most give up," she said softly. "They see things that aren't real memories. Fears, regrets." Ray looked around. "Sounds like a therapy session wrapped in a horror movie." Suddenly, the path ahead shifted. The forest began to change, trees twisted, colors melted. The air grew heavy. Ray saw Earth in front of him. His old apartment, empty and quiet. Then he saw his old team, turning away from him, whispering, "He's not ready." He shook his head. "No, that's not real." Lyrian placed a hand on his shoulder. "They are your fears," she said. "You must walk through them." Ray nodded slowly, walking forward. Again, as he moved, the vision changed. He saw Lyrian now, but she was standing alone. Weeping villagers threw stones, shouting, "Unworthy, unclaimed, cursed." Ray gasped. "Is this your memory?" She nodded. "Yes. The fire shows both sides now. It shows what we hide deep inside." Ray stepped in front of her, grabbing her hand. "No one's calling you that again," he said, his voice firm. "You're not unworthy. You're brave, strong, and honest." Lyrian stared at him, tears in her glowing eyes. "No one has ever said that to me." Ray smiled. "Get used to it." The fire trees around them began to burn brighter. The trial path opened again, revealing a wide stone circle with glowing marks. In the center was a platform with 2 handprints. "Carved into it," Lyrian whispered. "This is the heart of the trial." Ray stepped up and placed his hand on one of the marks. Lyrian did the same. The stone glowed bright, and the fire around them rose into a spiral. Then came the voice, not from outside, but inside their minds. "Do you stand together?" Ray answered first. "Yes." "Do you protect what was freely chosen?" Lyrian replied, "Yes." "Do you carry each other's burden, even through pain and fear?" They both answered, "Yes." Suddenly, the ground shook. A pulse of heat hit them both, and their bond marks burst into flame. But it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt warm. Like something alive was wrapping around their hearts. Ray fell to his knees, seeing a vision Larian trapped in a burning tower. Crying out his name, he ran to her, grabbed her hand, pulled her into his arms. And just like that, the vision ended. They were still holding hands on the platform. The fire faded and the air cooled. The stone under them glowed once more. The bond is complete. The voice said, "Two souls walk as one." Ray opened his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't just see Larian. He felt her calm, her fear, her deep happiness, and she felt him too. Their minds had become lightly connected. Not loud but gentle thoughts passed like whispers. "You can hear me?" he asked without speaking. Larian smiled. "Yes." They stepped off the platform as the door opened again. The elders stood waiting, eyes glowing with approval. The matron spoke. "You have passed the flames. You are no longer strangers. In bond, you are true mates." Ray looked at Larian, who smiled shyly. "We made it," she said. Ray grinned. "Still think the bite was a joke?" She laughed. "Maybe not." But Kale stood watching from the shadows, his face dark. His pride wounded, he turned and walked away. The fire trial had ended, but a new storm was waiting. Ray woke up in a soft bed made from something like glowing moss. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then he remembered the ceremony of fire. The bond Larian's hand in his. He turned his head and saw her sitting nearby, her legs crossed, her eyes closed, silent and still. She was meditating, or maybe just resting. But her thoughts were whispering in his mind. Not clear words, just feelings, images, emotions. Ray touched his chest and felt it again. That warmth. That quiet connection pulsing softly inside him. Larian opened her eyes and looked at him. "You heard me?" she asked, without using her voice. Ray nodded, smiling a little. "Not words exactly," he said. "But I knew you were thinking about rain." She laughed quietly. "That was my favorite memory. Rain on the mountain when I was a child. It was the only place I ever felt safe." Ray sat up, the bond still buzzing gently between them. "I don't know how this works," he said honestly, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Larian nodded slowly. "It will grow stronger with time. It only shares the deep things. Not every thought, only what the heart feels." They sat in silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. Outside, the sound of wind and distant bells filled the air. Ray turned to her, back in the fire trial. "I saw you, trapped and crying. I ran to save you." Larian's voice dropped. "That wasn't just fire magic," she said. "That was real. From my childhood, my caretakers locked me inside the prayer tower for disobeying them." Ray's heart tightened. "You were just a kid," he whispered. She nodded. "They said I was too wild, too loud. No one came for hours. I thought I'd die alone." Ray moved closer, not touching her. "I saw it," he said, "and I felt it. I've never hated silence so much." Larian turned her head, her voice soft. "Why did you stay?" "You had every reason to walk away." Ray shrugged. "Because I've seen pain before. But I've never seen someone carry it so quietly." Suddenly, a loud knock echoed at the door. A Celion healer entered, bowing respectfully. "Forgive me," she said, "but the male must complete his warrior's welcome. It is tradition for new mates to face the ceremonial blades." Ray stood up, confused. "I thought I passed all the tests." The healer smiled. "That was for the spirit. This is for the tribe." Larian's eyes widened. "No, he doesn't have to," she said quickly, but Ray raised his hand. "It's okay," he said. "I want to understand your world. And I want them to understand me." 2 hours later, Ray stood inside a wide arena made of glowing rock. Hundreds of Celions gathered around in silence. In the center stood an armored warrior, not Kale, but someone nearly as large. This was not a fight to the death, but a ritual spar to test a mate's bravery. Ray held a wooden blade, heavy and awkward. His opponent bowed, then attacked with speed and grace. Ray dodged the first blow and stumbled. He blocked the second, but barely. The crowd remained silent, watching, judging. Ray wasn't fast or strong like them, but he didn't run. He stood, defended, swung, and moved again. He took a hit to the side but didn't fall. Another two. The shoulder but he held his ground. When the warrior raised his blade high again, Ray dropped to one knee. But instead of surrendering, he lunged forward, using his whole weight to push the warrior back. The crowd gasped. The warrior fell, then laughed and stood up. He bowed deeply to Ray. "Courage without rage," he said. "Honor to your bond." The crowd began to cheer softly, not wild but respectful. Ray looked up to see Lyrian standing at the arena edge, her eyes filled with tears. When he returned to her, she whispered, "You bled for me." Ray smiled. "I didn't mean to, but I'd do it again that night." As they sat together beneath the glowing moonlights, Lyrian reached for his hand without speaking. Ray squeezed it gently. He could feel her heart through the bond, soft, scared, but slowly healing. "I was always alone," she said, "until I bit you." Ray leaned back, looking at the sky. "Then maybe your bite was fate." Lyrian laughed softly, resting her head on his shoulder, and though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew the truth, growing quietly between them. It wasn't just a bond anymore. It was something real, something worth fighting for. The days after the trial passed. Quietly, Ray and Lyrian spent time together in the inner garden of the temple. They talked more, shared memories, and began to laugh without fear. The bond between them grew stronger, and even their silent thoughts often touched. They didn't say they were in love yet, but something close was blooming. Still, not everyone was happy. Far across the city, Kale watched from the shadows. His pride had been crushed, his promise broken. He had trained since youth to claim Lyrian as his mate. But now, a human soft, slow, and strange had taken his place. Kale clenched his fists and knelt before the Council of Warriors. "I call for the right of reclaiming," he said. The elders looked at one another. "That path is dangerous," one said. "Do you understand what it means?" Kale growled. "Yes. If I win, the bond breaks. If I lose, I accept exile by law." Kale had the right, and by law, Ray could not refuse. The challenge would take place under the blood moon only 3 nights away. That evening, the matron came to Ray's chamber with Lyrian beside her. "There has been a challenge," the matron said. Ray stood up. "From who?" "Kale," Lyrian whispered, her voice shaking. Ray paused. "What does that mean?" The matron spoke carefully. "The ancient right of reclaiming." She said, "He wants to fight you, not just for pride, but for her. If he wins, your bond is broken. Lyrian must return to him." Ray's heart pounded. He looked at Lyrian, who looked down in shame. "I never wanted this," she said. "I didn't think he'd go this far." Ray clenched his jaw. "I'll face him," he said. "But not to keep you like a prize. I'll fight to protect what we've built." The matron nodded. "Prepare yourself, human. You have 3 nights, the days passed in training." Ray practiced with alien blades and light armor. He wasn't faster than Kale, not stronger, but he focused on balance, timing, and control. Lyrian helped him, guiding his hands, whispering encouragement. "You don't have to win with strength," she said. "Win with heart." Ray smiled. "I think that's the only way I ever win." Finally, the night came. The blood moon rose, bathing the sky in deep red. Hundreds of Salians gathered in the circle of stones. Kale stood shirtless, his body covered in glowing warrior marks. He held a blade carved from dark bone. Ray entered quietly. Holding his plain training weapon, he looked small compared to Caleb but calm. Lyrian stood with the matron, watching with wide, tearful eyes. The gong rang, and the match began. Cale charged like fire, swinging with rage. Ray ducked, blocked, and stepped back. He didn't try to overpower Cale. He waited, watching. Cale shouted, "You don't deserve her. She was mine." Ray didn't answer. Instead, he whispered in his heart, "I'm not here to take her. I'm here because she chose me to." Blow after blow came. Ray took a few hits, one to the ribs, another across the back. Blood touched the stone floor, but he stood his ground. He breathed deep, steady, waiting. Then Cale made a wide swing, too wide. Ray rolled under it and tapped Cale's leg. Cale stumbled slightly, his rage making him careless. The crowd watched in total silence. Ray focused, blocked, dodged, then struck Cale's shoulder clean and fast. Cale roared and rushed him again, but Ray flipped aside. Suddenly, Cale lost balance and fell to one knee. Ray raised his blade but didn't strike. Instead, he lowered his weapon, breathing hard. "I won't end you," he said. "You've already lost." Cale looked up, confused and panting. Ray continued, "Lyrian is not a trophy, not a reward. She's a person who made a choice, and you can't win by ignoring that." The elders stepped forward. The matron raised her hand. "The fight is finished," she said. "The human has won." Gasps filled the air, but so did quiet respect. Even warriors who doubted Ray now bowed their heads. Cale stood slowly, broken but not crushed. He looked at Ray, his pride bleeding through his silence. Then he turned and walked away. The law had spoken, and he would leave the city by dawn. Lyrian ran to Ray's side, her eyes full of tears. "You didn't fight for glory," she said. "You fought for me." Ray touched her face gently. "I didn't want to be your hero," he whispered. "I just wanted to be your choice." She smiled, her fingers brushing his wrist where the bond mark still glowed bright. "And you are," she said, "forever and in the quiet of the firelit night." With the stars above and the people watching in silence, they stood together, not just bonded by bite or law, but by choice, by trust, and by something deeper than either could explain. The stars above Celia Prime were calm again. The fire trials were over. The challenge had passed. The air no longer held tension, but peace. And in that peace, two souls rested quietly in each other's light. Ray and Lyrian stood on the mountain top outside the city. Below them, soft glowing trees swayed in the wind. Their hands were joined, and the bond between them pulsed like a heartbeat. It was no longer just magic, no longer just custom. It was real. Lyrian looked out over her world. "I used to climb this hill alone," she whispered, "when I had no one. I would come here and pretend the stars were speaking to me." Ray smiled gently. "What did they say?" She blushed. "That one day someone would hear me too." He turned to her, brushing a silver strand of hair from her cheek. "Well," he said softly, "I hear you now." Later that day, the temple prepared for their final ceremony. Not a trial, not a challenge, but a celebration. The bond of life was to be declared in front of the people. Only those who had passed every trial, spirit, heart, and soul could take part in it. Ray wore a robe of starlight silk, gifted by the elders. Lyrian wore a soft gown woven from nightgrass, glowing with faint light as she moved. She no longer looked like the girl who bid a stranger for fun. She now walked like a woman with pride, love, and peace in her eyes. As they entered the ceremonial hall, the crowd stood in silence. Not because of fear, but respect. The same people who once doubted now bowed. Even the young ones looked up at Ray with wide eyes. A human had earned a place in their deepest tradition. The matron raised her voice. "Two hearts, once strangers, now walk as one. The bond made by bite tested by flame and proven by choice, stands unshaken. Ray and Lyrian stepped into a circle of blue flame that did not burn. Together, they placed their hands on a crystal heartstone. Their marks glowed bright, matching in shape and light. The matron smiled. "In the name of our ancestors and the stars above, you are now soulbound, not by accident, not by mistake, but by will." Human and Celion joined in truth. The crowd burst into soft song, a humming sound that filled the air like a river of stars. Lyrian leaned her head on Ray's shoulder. "I never thought I'd feel this," she whispered. Ray kissed the top of her head. "I never thought I'd find it out here." That night, the two walked through the celebration streets together. Children threw flower lights into the air. Elders gave them gifts, fruit, silk, and blessings. Ray smiled at every stranger. Not feeling like a stranger anymore, in a quiet moment, away from the lights and music, Lyrian and Ray sat near a pool of still water. Their reflections shimmered on the surface, side by side. "I used to wonder what it meant to belong," she said softly. "I was born here, but always felt outside." Ray looked into the water. "I was always chasing purpose," he said, "always running to find it somewhere else." She touched his hand. "Then maybe," she whispered. "We were running toward each other." Ray chuckled gently. "Sounds like something out of a love song." She smiled. "Maybe we should write one." Time passed, and days became weeks. Ray built a small home with help from Lyrian's clan. It was a simpler mix of Earth style and Celion design. Plants grew from the walls. Light drifted from the ceiling like natural stars. It wasn't big, but it felt like home one morning. As the twin suns rose, Lyrian stood on the porch, watching the sky. Ray walked out with 2 warm cups, one in each hand. She took hers and sipped, smiling. "Do you regret staying?" she asked. Ray looked at her. "At first, I was scared," he admitted. "Everything was strange." "You were strange," she laughed. "Still am," he nodded. "Yeah. But now it's my kind of strange, my home kind." They watched the sun rise in silence, heart steady, bond steady. No more tests, no more doubts. Just them together. Later that day, children from the village ran to their home. One small boy tugged on Ray's robe. "Mr. Ray," he asked, "is it true? She bit you?" Ray laughed. "It's true." The kids gasped, and one little girl shouted, "Then you're hers forever." Lyrian walked over and placed a hand on Ray's chest. "Forever," she said proudly, and he chose it. Ray looked at her with a grin. "Every time," he whispered. "And I'd choose it again." The bond pulsed once more. Not because of magic, or trial, or tradition, but because their hearts had become one. A human and an alien, joined not by accident, but by love, her mate for life.